Welcome to Story Sale English. And today we begin the story of Confucius, not as a distant saint carved in stone, but as a real man who lived through a broken age, suffered deeply and still changed the world. Long before he became the teacher of 10,000 generations, Confucius was born into a world already coming apart. The Zhou order still existed in name, but the old balance of ritual, hierarchy, and restraint was collapsing. Lords fought lords, desire outran duty, and the language of order was slowly losing its power. He was born in the state of Lu, into a family whose ancestry reached back to the nobility of song and still further, to the fading memory of the Shang, yet ancient blood could not protect him from present hardship. By the time he entered the world, the glory of his ancestors had become only a shadow. His father died when he was only 3 years old, and his mother raised him alone. Their life was uncertain and often poor, but even as a child, he was drawn to ritual with unusual seriousness. While other children played freely, the young Confucius arranged ceremonial vessels, practiced formal gestures, and seemed already to sense that if the world was to be repaired, it would begin with reverence. When he was 17, his mother died too. He had to search for his father's burial place before he could bury them together. And that lonely struggle revealed how little protection life had given him. Grief did not harden him, but it did deepen him. And to survive, he worked humble jobs. He managed grain, watched livestock, handled small clerical duties, and lived close to the ordinary burdens of the world. Yet he refused to let survival become the whole meaning of life. While working, he kept studying, and while studying, he began to teach. He gathered students not because he was rich or powerful, but because he believed learning should not belong only to the privileged. In that belief alone, he had already begun to change history. He sought wisdom wherever he could find it. He learned from masters of ritual, music, and old traditions. Walking toward knowledge as if pushing open a door that had long been shut, he was not collecting elegant ideas. He was preparing to rebuild a civilization from its moral foundations. In Qi, he heard the refined music of the Shao and was so moved that, for a time, he forgot the taste of meat. Beauty for him was never separate from order. Music, ritual, and ethics were threads of the same fabric, and when they were woven rightly, the human heart could be brought back into harmony. At last, in his 50s, Confucius entered public office in Lu. He served first as a local magistrate, then rose further, showing that he was more than a thinker of elegant sayings. He could govern, judge, organize, and act. At the diplomatic meeting of Jiagu, he helped Lu recover territory from Qi, and for a moment, it seemed that history might finally give him the chance he had long prepared for. Perhaps the teacher would become a reformer. Perhaps the dreamer would become a builder of states. But the age was stronger than the man. Confucius tried to restore order by discipline and principle, while those around him preferred pleasure, advantage, and short victories. When Lu was seduced by luxury and distracted by gifted dancers and horses, the fragile bridge between moral government and political power gave way. So he left Lu. That departure became one of the great turning points of his life because what followed was not triumph, but 14 long years of wandering through the states of the world, carrying a vision almost no ruler truly wanted. He traveled with his disciples across roads, plains, rivers, and city gates, moving from one court to another, always hopeful, always vulnerable. The landscapes changed, the rulers changed, the dangers changed, but the same question followed him everywhere. Would anyone choose virtue over convenience? In Quang, he was mistaken for another man and surrounded by hostile locals. His disciples were ready to fight, but Confucius restrained them. Even in danger, he would not surrender himself to violence, because he refused to let fear rewrite the standards by which he lived. In Wei, he found temporary welcome, but not lasting peace. A court life there exposed him to compromise, rumor, and humiliation. After witnessing a spectacle in which power and desire paraded openly while virtue stood aside, he uttered a bitter truth. He had never seen anyone love virtue as much as beauty. In song, while he and his disciples practiced ritual beneath a great tree, a powerful official sought to kill him. The tree itself was cut down as a warning. Yet Confucius remained calm, speaking as if the moral force entrusted to him could not be uprooted so easily. In Zhang, he became separated from his disciples and stood alone outside the eastern gate, weary and exposed. Someone described him as looking like a stray dog from a mourning household. When the remark was reported to him, he did not grow angry. He smiled and admitted that the description was painfully accurate. There were also long stretches when no dramatic event happened at all, only endless road, river mist, mountain wind, and the quiet ache of moving forward without a home. Those were the spaces in which disappointment settled deepest, because not every wound comes from violence. Some come from being unwanted for too long. His hardest ordeal came between Chen and Kai, where he and his disciples were trapped in the wild and left without proper food for days. Hunger weakened the body, but it also tested the soul. Some disciples grew bitter, some lost heart. Yet Confucius continued teaching, as though inner order mattered most when outer order had failed completely. At last help came from Chu. Riders appeared through dust and distance, and rescue arrived where despair had nearly closed in. Even then, hope rose only briefly. Once again, real political acceptance came close enough to be seen, then slipped away. When he was nearly 70, Confucius returned to Lu. He was honored as an elder, but not truly entrusted with the work he had sought all his life. He came home not as a victorious statesman, but as a man who had carried his ideals farther than the world was willing to carry them. Then private sorrow deepened public disappointment. His son died before him, and so did Yan Hui, the disciple he cherished most. These were not symbolic losses. They were personal wounds, and they darkened his final years with a grief no philosophy could erase. Even then, he did not stop caring about the fate of states. When he heard of political murder in Qi, he fasted, purified himself, and urged Lu to respond. Others hesitated, others calculated. Confucius, old and wounded as he was, still believed that moral outrage mattered. Unable to reshape the age through office, he turned more fully to teaching and to the preservation of memory. In his later years, he devoted himself to educating disciples and to refining the traditions that would outlive him. If the present refused him, then he would speak to the future. Around him, bamboo slips, old songs, remembered rituals, and historical records became more than scholarship. They became a final act of resistance against cultural collapse. By preserving meaning, he was still trying to preserve civilization. He taught that benevolence was not weakness, that ritual was not empty performance, and that the noble person was defined not by birth, but by character. He believed that government without trust would not stand, that learning without reflection would fail, and that a society without moral limits would eventually destroy itself. That is why Confucius still matters. He was not merely offering polite rules for behavior. He was asking how human beings could live together without falling into chaos, greed, and humiliation. He was trying to rebuild the world from the inside out. In the end, he died without seeing the kind of political renewal he had hoped for. Yet his disciples mourned him deeply, and the ideas he carried moved on long after his body was buried. Dynasties would rise and fall, but the questions he asked never disappeared. Thank you for sailing with us through the story of Confucius. If you enjoyed this journey, please like, subscribe, and share this video. Leave a comment below and tell us whose story you would like to hear next. We would love to tell it with you on Story Sale English.